Today you will read 4 historical accounts. First you will read to understand what each account is about. Then you will reread with a partner to analyze similarities and differences in authors and points of view. I want you to first look at the genre of this text. This text is a journal entry or news article. Something that helps understanding of journal entries is the date at the beginning of the journal entry. In the first passage here, under Village Life in America, you see December 20th, 1855. That tells us of a time period, and that gives us context to when this article was written. When you read, I want you to look at the closed reading habits that says, "Why does Caroline Richards think about Anthony's idea?" Reread your journal. Underline one sentence that hints at Richards' point of view. Before I begin reading, I want to look at our context clues to give us some understanding about the text we read. Alright, so we have 4 titles here. Our 4 titles are Village Life in America, U.S. Marshal Arrests Anthony, Rochester Union and Advertiser, November 3rd, 1872, and on women's right to vote. We also have an illustration here and a caption. The caption says Susan B. Anthony. When we read, we're going to go ahead and make sure we look for something that hints at what Caroline Richards thinks about Anthony's idea. Please put your finger on the first word of paragraph 1, and we are going to begin. From Village Life in America. Paragraph 1. December 20th, 1855. Susan B. Anthony is in town and spoke in Bennett's Hall this afternoon. She had a large audience and talked very plainly about our rights and how we ought to stand up for them, and said the world would never go right until the woman had just as much right to vote and rule as the man. She asked us all to come up and sign our names who would promise to do all in our power to bring about this glad day when equal rights should be law of the land. A whole lot of us went up and signed the paper. I could not make grandmother agree with her at all, and she said we ought better all of us just stay at home. Next, we're going to read U.S. Marshal Arrests Anthony. Paragraph 1. Rochester, New York. Susan B. Anthony was arrested at her home on Madison Street on November 28th. She was charged with the crime of illegal voting. On November 1st, Miss Anthony, her 3 sisters, and 11 other Rochester women registered to vote at a local barbershop. At first, election inspectors refused. Then Anthony threatened to take the inspectors to court and sue them for a large sum of money. Finally, the election supervisor agreed to allow the women to register to vote in Rochester, 8th Ward. 4 days later, Anthony and other women voted in the 1872 presidential election. A poll watcher who observed the election process filed a complaint about Miss Anthony's action. William Soares acted on the complaint. He ordered Miss Anthony's arrest on November 14th. Mr. Soares also ordered the arrest of the other women and the elected inspectors. So when I look at this passage, I'm trying to identify what Caroline Richards thought about Anthony's idea. I see here, based on her actions, something that she might have believed in. It says here, a whole lot of us went up and signed the paper. And then it said, I could not get grandmother to agree with us at all. She thought we better ought to stay home. Based on her actions, that shows me that she agrees with Susan B. Anthony because she decided to sign the paper in agreement to support her. I also want to highlight the word rights. We see here in this passage it talks about their right to vote, and the women's rights should be the same as men. Right is a multi-meaning word. That word has more than one meaning. It could be the direction, as in left and right. It could be the right thing to do, as in the correct thing. Or in this case, it's rights, as in something that someone possesses. We're going to go now to the next page, page 239, and look at the passages there and the point of view in those passages. From Rochester Union and Advertiser, November 3rd, 1872. Citizenship no more carries the right to vote than it carries the power to fly to the moon. If these women in 8th Ward offered to vote, they should be prosecuted to the full extent of the law. So I see here, prosecuted to the full extent of the law. That is telling me something very strong about how the person is feeling. And prosecuted means press charges against. So they want something very serious to happen to the women who want to vote. This is a different point of view than the woman Caroline was speaking on earlier. Down to the next passage. From On Women's Right to Vote by Susan B. Anthony, June 19th, 1873. Friends and fellow citizens, I stand before you tonight under indictment for the alleged crime of having voted at the last presidential election without having a lawful right to vote. It shall be my work this evening to prove to you that in thus voting I not only committed no crime, but instead simply exercised my citizen's right, guaranteed to me and all United States citizens by the national Constitution, beyond the power of any state to deny. Paragraph 2. The preamble of the Federal Constitution says, "We, the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessing of liberty to ourselves and our posterity, to ordain and establish a Constitution for the United States of America." It was we, the people, not we, the white male citizens, nor yet we, the male citizens, but we, the whole people, who formed the Union, and we formed it, not to give the blessing of liberty, but to secure them, not to the half of ourselves and the half of our prosperity, but to the whole people, women as well as men. Looking at our closed reading habits, it says, what do the editorial writer and Anthony think about whether a woman trying to vote is a crime? Reread the editorial and the speech. Underline sentences that express point of view. We already discussed how the editorial felt that women should be prosecuted to the full extent of the law, but looking at Susan B. Anthony's speech, I see here that it says, not only command no crime, but I instead simply exercise my citizen's right, guaranteed to me, all United States citizens, by the national Constitution, beyond the power of any state to deny. So I see here that she feels she did not commit a crime. in contrast or something different than what the editorial may say. Looking at our questions now, I'd like you to turn to your neighbor and talk to your neighbor about how Susan B. Anthony's opinion and point of view is different than the point of view of that of the men she was trying to oppose. Go. Okay, let's come back together. Looking at our questions on the next page, it says, Part A, which statement best describes the difference in how Anthony's attempts to vote is presented in the article U.S. Marshal Arrests Anthony and Anthony's speech on women's right to vote? I want you guys to go ahead with your partner and look back at how they are different, because here in question in Part A it says describe the difference. So that is talking about the contrast. Go. Okay, let's come back together. So our options say A, the writer thinks Anthony's attempt to vote was criminal, but Anthony thinks her act was not a crime. And when I look at the U.S. Marshal Arrests Anthony, it does not talk about it being a criminal act. So I am going to go ahead and cross out A. B, the article writer thinks that Anthony's attempt to vote was brave, but Anthony does not think she acted bravely. Okay, I'm going to go ahead to number C. The article writer reports Anthony's attempt to vote without taking sides, but Anthony's report that she's committed a crime. I'm going to cross out C because that contradicts what it says. Anthony believes she did not commit a crime. And D, the article writer does not say whether Anthony's attempt to vote was right or wrong. Anthony says her act was not a crime. Half of that statement is something we have already highlighted where it says it was not a crime. We underline that in paragraph 1. Looking back at U.S. Marshal Arrests Anthony, I'm going to look for clues that help me answer that question. When I look back on the U.S. Marshal Arrests Anthony, I'm going to reread it aloud. Rochester, New York. Susan B. Anthony was arrested at her home on Madison Street on November 28th. She was charged with the crime of illegal voting. On November 1st, Ms. Anthony, her 3 sisters, and 11 other Rochester women registered to vote at a local barber shop. At first, the election inspector refused. Then, Ms. Anthony threatened to take the inspector to court and sue him for a large sum of money. Finally, the elector supervisor agreed and allowed the women to register to vote in Rochester 8th Ward. 4 days later, Anthony and other women voted in the 1872 elections. So far in what I read, there is nothing in here that is saying if she was right or if she was wrong. It is just telling us the events that occurred. So there's not giving an opinion. So I'm going to circle letter D because it tells you if she was acting in which she thought it was not a crime, and that is correct. And the article also shows a clear depiction of her attempts and what came after it without an opinion. Please now go ahead and answer the rest of the questions on your own.